Hey guys, Owen from Touratech USA here to do an install video on the upper crash bars for the R1300GS Adventure. Available in this epoxy coated black or the electro-polished stainless steel. These will fit perfectly with the finish of your OEM crash bars, bolt right up and give you a little bit of extra protection up top. Let's dig into the hardware and get started. Alright guys, as always, the first step of a successful installation is to get your parts laid out and organized. I also like to start by making sure that I've got the installation instructions pulled up. I always find these at Touratech-USA.com, just on the product page where I ended up purchasing the parts. As you can see here, we got a mixture of different hardware. We got some clamps that'll attach the upper bars to the lower bars. Got some protective tape to keep that finish nice on the lower bars, as well as some cool little accent plates that we'll show you installing later on in the video. For the tools that we're going to need for this install, it starts with a T40, a T30, and a T25 Torx. I like to use these bits so I can use my wrench and ratchet in order to make it go a little bit quicker. You'll also end up needing a 2.5 Allen drive. In addition to those, the last two pieces are a 10mm and a 7mm wrench. An extension helps out for some of the harder to reach fasteners, and that's everything you need to get this install going. So with that, let's get to taking off some body panels. Alright, the first step is to take off this top cover plate and then this side metal accent right here. All of these guys are going to be T25 fasteners, so you're going to go ahead and put them in each here and start loosening them up. I like to get them loose and then come back with an electric ratchet to save a little bit of time. And then we'll also show you, it's really critical when you're doing an install with this many bolts to keep all of the pieces together and neatly organized, so when you're putting it back together, it's really simple. And since the next step is to get this whole top panel off, we're going to rotate the handlebars out of the way so that we can access the rearward most bolt back here. Again, starting by hand and then letting the machine. And this whole section comes off. It's easiest to start up at the front here, put a little bit of upwards pressure, and then work your way back, just popping it out of its clips. Now that we've got access to a couple of these hidden away screws, we're going to take out on this model 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a hidden guy back here. So 5 screws to get the nose cone to slide off of the front of the bike. This is where having an extension can come in handy, so you can get to this one tucked back in here. Once you feel it go into the head of the bolt, again starting it by hand. And letting the machine do the work. And with that, let's dive into this hidden bolt back here. And working our way just a little bit deeper, we've got 4 more bolts remaining to take off on this side here. As you guys may have noticed, we're working with a good bit of hardware here. Anytime you do that, it's very important that each bolt ends up back in its corresponding hole that it was originally removed out of. When I'm working on these things, what I like to do is just thread the bolt back in or rest it through the hole that it was originally on as you take the parts off of the bike as such. What some people like to do is they'll take a piece of cardboard, draw kind of an outline of the bike or the part that they're working on, and then just push the bolts through the hardware, or through the cardboard. Either way works, as long as you're confident that the bolt is returning to its original hole, you know that you've got a job well done. All right, so as you'll notice, I have 3 bolts. That 4th bolt that we just took out, it fell deep into the side of the bike. Not every install goes according to plan, but you always learn something. I got a little nervous there until I realized that the next steps are to remove 1 bolt here and 1 bolt up here, which will open up this panel, and I'll bet you we can get that bolt that I dropped in there out by doing that. So let's take the same bit driver, our trusty Torx T25, and let's get these internal bolts off on the inside here. And with that, this panel will kind of separate a little bit. And there comes our bolt. And now, I think we should be good to move on to the other side. With all those guys done, the next step is going to be to start getting this nose cone off here. Now we are already through the most difficult part of the install. Since you've gotten those guys off on this side, it should be a snap to come on over to the other side and repeat the same process. Working in the same order, we're making sure that we're keeping all the bolts in their respective holes. This side over here should be the exact same as the other side. And as always, if you get tripped up anywhere, never hesitate to call us here at Touratech. So let's get started on this side. As you can see, we did the same thing on this other side here, took off all the fasteners the same way as we did on the other one. I went to remove the nose cone here. I got some of the rivets out, but I noticed that there are actually a couple more bolts that we need to get to. I'm not sure if this is just on the option 719, but it's not listed in the instructions, so I wanted to show you these guys up front. Once we get these off, we should be home free to pull the whole beak off the motorcycle. Now with those done, you just want to work your way from back to front, slowly releasing everything on the beak. Not a whole lot of force required here. And looks like the pieces of the beak will actually separate out into the side. You got a couple of pop rivets right up here in the front. So you'll work your way from the back. And then once you've got it loose all the way around, you want to push down on the actual beak itself and kind of up on this front nose part here. And just like that, we've got access to where we're going to be putting this mounting bracket. All right, at this point, I'm sure you've heard it quite a few times, but we got one more layer deeper to go. We're still peeling back this onion. Thankfully, this one is only held on with 1, 2, 3 bolts, and then a couple of pop rivets down here that I'll show you how to get off. So let's get these guys going. With these 3 bolts removed, you'll notice that we've got a decent bit of play out here. As always, when you're moving plastic parts around, you can usually visually identify where everything is kind of held together. In this case, there's 2 pop rivets right here that are going to need to be removed by hand. The way to do that I've found is easiest is to grab right underneath and then right up top. And you're kind of wanting to press with your thumbs into the tank as you pull with your fingers to get those 2 rivets to pop out. Nothing too gentle, but it does require some force. And then that gets you in. A little bit of wiggle here is all you need to access the last piece of the puzzle. So before we get to putting this center bracket on, I'm gonna go over to the other side, do the same thing over there. Now that we've got this panel nice and loose, it gives us enough access to come in and touch the final 3 bolts that we need to use on this bike. These front 2 are the similar bolts to what we've already been pulling out. Both of these are T25 heads that will be reused. This rear bolt right here is a T30 that will be replaced by one of the bolts that comes with the Touratech kit. We're using these mounting points to get the drop bracket up into place. So let's start with our familiar T25s and get these out of here. Switch our head here over to a T30. This is going to allow us to get that bigger, final replaceable bolt out. And as always, let's go and repeat the process on the other side. All right, now that we've got both sides nice and wiggly here, we've got plenty of room to get our drop bracket placed in from the lower side. As you're putting this on, you'll notice that there's one side that's lower than the other. The lowest bolt hole always faces forward, so for alignment's sake, make sure that it goes up before you slide it into place. With that being said, you just come in from the bottom here, making sure not to scrape or rub up against anything. You'll likely have to shift the sides around a bit just to be sure that you get everything up into place. Some stretching of the bracket may be necessary, and once you get it up into place, it will almost hold itself there. And once you've got it resting approximately where it needs to go, you'll notice, if you remember, we're reusing the factory fasteners here, and we're replacing the factory fastener on the back side here. You can tell that this is the correct bolt because there's only two of them. It is the M6 by 30 millimeter, as well as a small spacer. The spacer goes between the bracket and the frame of the bike. So you're gonna take the spacer, give yourself a little bit of wiggle room here to get that in between. And then once it's in place, I like to start with that rear M6 by 30. Just hand tight it first, and then we're going to grab the smaller bolt heads that originally came out of that hole, and these guys are just going to thread right back into their same factory bolt holes. If I can get it, there we go. And as always, once you are done, repeat this process on the other side. And because there are 6 attachment points for this one drop bracket, we don't need to go crazy with torque here. We are looking at approximately 8 or 9 foot-pounds on the smaller bolts, and all the way up to approximately 13 or 14 on the bigger ones. Not too much needed at all, because most of the strength from these crash bars comes from the attachment points to the lower bars. All right, with those drop brackets in place, we are ready to start reassembly. In order to begin reassembly, we need to get this piece that we've loosened back onto the bike. This is held in place with these 2 pop rivets you can see here, which mate with the female ends built into the metal tank here. Before you start pushing, lift up a little bit, make sure that they're both centered into the hole, and then apply firm pressure and ensure both of these clips seat against the tank. With this firmly attached, we're now ready to start putting the bolt holes back in. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to go. All right, the next logical step is to start putting this side fairing on. Since the front of this is bolted through the bottom here and clipped into place with this guy up here, it makes more sense to get this out before we try to align everything here. Since these two bolts are already removed, it's just two pop rivets right in the middle of this piece that are holding it on. You're going to want to apply downward pressure through this hole here while you lift up on the exterior over here in order to pop this piece off. And that gives us much better access to everything here. Now we're ready to start putting this piece back on. You'll notice that the only two pop clips on this side are right up here in the front, and they correspond right there. The rest of it is going to be done with bolts. So at this point, what you do is hold it up into place, make sure that the front mounting point lines up, and then press down until it seats into those pop clips right here. Now that we've got every piece here firmly together and the nose cone started, we're ready to get the bolts into these holes here. These are going to hold the back end of this secure to the bike and then give us a good position to attach the final top cap. Now the last two pieces to get this fairing nice and tight are going to be the attachments for this wind deflector here. The small one we've got hidden around back and this one up front. And then we can put this guy back on. Now with this piece nice and tight, we're ready to put the final cover on over here. This accent piece here is the only one of these bolts that have this little plastic washer. As soon as you get those back on, we're ready to start looking at the crash bars. All right, and the next step before we start getting underneath and attaching the crash bars is to put our nose cone back on. As you can tell, we've got the two tabs that slide into place up top here. We've got a couple of tabs that engage on the sides right there, and then the front is held in with these two bolts right there and these two pop clivets. I like to start from the top, make sure those tabs are in place, make sure that these sides get seated onto their tabs, and press everything together. This allows us to put the bolts in from underneath as well. With that nice and tight, let's dive underneath. Now that we've got everything ready to go onto the bike, I'm going to use this time to install our Garnish plate, so it's a little bit easier to access the bolts for this. As mentioned earlier, these are pretty tiny little screws, so you'll want to get your 2.5 Allen ready to go, as well as the nylock nut and the 7mm wrench. It's always good to start it by hand, especially with these smaller fasteners. And then once you've got it threaded, move on to the opposite side. Use your wrench to hook onto the bottom and your Allen to drive it from the top. As always, repeat this on the other side, and then we're ready to get this up onto the bike. Now that we're ready to put the crash bars up in place, it's helpful to get the protective tape located on your clamps, both male and female side, just so that they are perfectly positioned when everything's going on. Comes with 8 of these small rectangular strips. It's not the end of the world if they're not perfectly aligned. These aren't going to be visible when they're on the bike, but they will protect the finish of the lower crash bars that are getting the clamps put on them. So you just kind of set them in place, rub it in a little bit. This stuff does wonders for making sure that the paint or the epoxy coating does not rub off. Got both of those sides good. And then we're going to pick up the crash bar, situate it however it makes sense, and then get the other sides on. Now as we're doing this, it's a good time to mention having the hardware ready to go will make the next step a little bit easier. I'm going to be doing this install alone, but it can be helpful to have a friend with you once you're getting everything up into place. But it's nice to put this tape on, keep everything protected. And with that, we're ready to pivot up and put everything into place on the bike. Now that everything is ready, we are going to do our first installation of the bar. The best way to do this is to grab one of your hardware stacks you'll need. This is going to be the M6 by 20 with an M6 washer and an M6 nut. I like to start by doing the harder part first by hand. That'll kind of hold it all in place. So the piece of the top connection point that's closest to the rider bolt goes in, and then you can push the whole assembly up into place, which I'll do now. And with the upper attachment point on, the bars will sort of rest where they want to be. So it's just getting that washer and the nut on there that's challenging. By doing the hard part first, it saves us from having to come back in here with tools, get it done afterwards. Just looking for the first couple of threads on that nut. There we go. And with the hard nut attached up top, you'll notice that the crash bars are very delicately sitting in place. Now we can start putting these clamps on. The female side of the clamp has a catch that will hold the large M8 nut captive. So I like to kind of rest that in there, pinch it with my hands, and then get my M8 nut ready to go down from the top. You'll always grab this, hinge it into place, from the clamp. And then take your bolts through the top and into the nylock nut. Same thing with the back one, bolt from the top. Nut in your clamp. And hinge it in place. Just looking for a loose attachment at this point. Now, as you can see under, we've already got the more difficult bolt in place and threaded, so it's just time to get the front bolt in. Again, we're going through both of these guys. It'll kind of hold itself in place. Take your washer, drop it up top, like so, and then get your nut on there as well. Once it's threaded, you can switch to tools. This is going to be a 10mm as well as a T30 Torx. And we're not going for super tight yet because we're still hoping to set the final placement on these, but get them tighter so that they will hold themselves in place. It's nice to walk the tension back and forth between the two sides as well. Now that all attachment points are loosely set on the bike, we're ready to go in and get it set to our final tightness. Before we do that, I actually ended up missing 2 of these small T20 screws from earlier, so I'm just going to finish everything up by going in and getting this inner fender attachment on, and then I'll tighten everything down and we'll be all set. It's best to kind of start the final tension with the 2 bolts that connect to the nose cone. So if you hold it up into place, make sure that it's lined up with the lines of your fairings. You can go back in and tighten up the 2 bolts here and then come down to these bottom clamps like I'll show you. Alright guys, well, you made it to the end of the video and I really appreciate you watching the whole thing. If you do decide to take on this install yourself, just be mindful that nothing's too complicated. It's just a whole bunch of bolts coming off and going right back in. That nose connection right down in the middle there is what gives the crash bar its strength, and we optimized having a difficult install for having a really strong product. So please feel free, if you run into any hiccups, to give us a call. These parts and others are all available on our website at touratech-usa.com.